Organic Climbing is the official sponsor of Sends and Suffers podcast. And if you didn't know, now you know. I have been using this company's products since before my podcast, since I basically started rock climbing. They're cool, they're rad, they're customizable. You can get bouldering pads, chalk buckets, backpacks. They've got shoes. They've got almost anything you can conceive to make you look fly, to make you functional at the crag. Check out Organic Climbing. Put in Sends and Suffers at your purchase. It helps this podcast out and really support someone who has been supporting the conception of climbing communities since the beginning. Josh and everyone at Organic is all about making sure communities grow. And that is a huge thing coming from a small company that moves massive, massive mountains. So check out Organic Climbing. Tell them I sent you. Let's get into this episode.
Hey, I'm Emily Chen Newton, and you are listening to the Adaptive Climbing podcast series, Everybody Climbs. This is a collaborative podcast, so I'll be popping into your feed of Plugtone audio podcasts about once a month with para and adaptive climbing content. Big thanks to Mario Stanley of Sends and Suffers for welcoming us to his platform for a while. In this episode, we hear from Jared Lenahan. He's a U.S. Navy veteran. He was a Fleet Marine Force Corpsman, which is a combat medic for the Marine Corps. After an accident overseas, he found himself going from climber to paraclimber. After finding and then using adaptive climbing as an integral part of his recovery, he's now competed as a US Paraclimbing Team Athlete for 4 years. Jared is also a National Ability Center and Move United Warfighter ambassador. Because the adaptive outdoor community has been so critical to his personal recovery, he started a program to help other wounded warriors get integrated into the community through adaptive climbing. His program is called ClimbABLE. It introduces warriors to the adaptive sports community before they lose their military community and shows them a streamlined path to transition from recovery into the rest of their lives. In this interview, Jared and I talk about disability identity, imposter syndrome, addiction, and how climbing as a through line in his life has guided his life decisions, especially the decision to start ClimbABLE. We recorded this conversation in early 2024, when, as Jared explains, he's still in the fundraising phase, but hopes to officially launch the program by the summer of 2024. Here's our conversation. You are, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're still in the fundraising planning phases with ClimbABLE. Do you have any kind of you're trying to launch in the winter or spring?
Yeah, so the paraclimbing and adaptive sports camp at the National Ability Center, that'll be happening in September. I need about $20,000 to run this program once this year. That's including, taking the warriors to Sport Rock, bringing them out to National Ability Center, just all the operational costs. I've been able to raise a good amount of that, and I only have about $7,000 left to raise. So basically, as the sooner I can raise the rest of the money needed, the sooner I can start bringing warriors to Sport Rock. I am pulling participants from different pots, if that makes sense. A certain amount of people are going to come from Walter Reed, from Navy Wounded Warrior. A certain amount of people are going to be recommended by some nonprofits that I work with as an ambassador. So Move United, National Ability Center. I'd like to start bringing them next week. However, I have to fundraise a lot of money. So, I've been going to Sport Rock. They've been really generous in letting me set up tables there at different demos and events. I had shirts, tank tops, flags, stickers, all that made to assist with fundraising efforts. And once all the money has been raised, that's when ClimbABLE will be able to start. I'll find the participants. It then transitions to Sport Rock and climbing gyms in Maryland and Virginia. I start by bringing this group of 10 warriors to Sport Rock once a week. And then after teaching these warriors about, recovery through sport, life after the military, getting them familiar with rock climbing, I then fly them out to the National Ability Center in Park City, Utah for a 4-day paraclimbing and adaptive sports camp to continue their adaptive sports journey. When starting your journey as a wounded warrior, life changes instantaneously. You recover at Walter Reed for years, and then 8 times out of 10, the military finds you too disabled to continue serving your country. They tell you, at the end of years of recovery, it's like, hey, you're found unfit for duty. You have 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. You have to get out of the military. You have this very short amount of time to transition, and you lose your community. You feel lost. Your whole world comes crashing down around you. And the military, they're very focused on recovery, as they should be. However, they're not focused on life after recovery. And that's where I step in. So I recovered at Walter Reed for close to 5 years. I found my way into the adaptive sports community around the 4th year of recovery. And that's only because I was in the right place at the right time, heard about an event being put on by a nonprofit that I had never heard of before. And I have learned that the adaptive sports community is the community that a wounded warrior needs to start integrating with, not at the end of their recovery, but at the beginning of their recovery and before they're forced out of the military. And rock climbing is the tool that I'm going to use to introduce them to that community.
So you're really wanting to come in and not so much dealing with the straightforward recovery phases, recovery part of things, but it's how do you become back integrated into a community? How do you get social support, that kind of thing? Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, it's integration into the community, because the warrior is going to lose that community once they finish with recovery. And so the thinking behind this is if I can integrate them into the adaptive sports community earlier, like while they're in recovery, not afterwards, and teach them, be like, hey, you're going to probably get tossed out of the military 8 times out of 10. Start thinking about that now. There are these nonprofits. There are all these organizations that want to provide these opportunities for you that has the community that you're going to lose. It's right here. And so it's really saving them a bunch of time through their own recovery. It's kind of giving them a streamlined recovery process where it's like, hey, don't go through recovery and then years later find your way into the community then. Start getting integrated now and start living life now. Start getting back to living life now. Get that fire under your butt to make a return from recovery no matter what the odds.
And what is it about climbing that you think will work particularly well as a vehicle to do this?
So I have learned that climbing is a lot like life. Every route is different. It has its own set of challenges and obstacles, and veterans love a good challenge. And like the military, a climber learns to find comfort in uncomfortable places. And you're also reminded that as humans, we're capable of so much more than we think. And these are just some of the major reasons that I keep coming back to climbing. I always have that community, and I aspire for others to come to these same realizations much earlier in life or much earlier in recovery than I did.
And I assume when you're talking about all of this, it's not just like a place to hang out on a Thursday night with your buddies. Like there's resource sharing and stuff that happens when you become integrated into a community.
Oh, there's so much resource sharing. Just climbing as a platform for my life, it provides everything.
Yeah. I mean, and when you're climbing with a certain cohort of people and people with similar life experiences, inevitably there are other benefits more than just climbing a route. You're going to be exchanging, I don't know, like healthcare information or different prosthetics that have helped you, like depending on what kind of disability that you're dealing with, that's going to all be part of the experience, right? You're not just there to share beta on the climb, you're sharing the beta for the rest of life too.
Yeah, you share. Yeah, especially when you have other people that have had similar experiences. It's just a much more comfortable environment. You're much more comfortable to open up and, share these life experiences and the troubles you've been through and what things have helped you and just everything.
Yeah, there's something about getting like really sweaty, like really dirty, like you just like somehow that makes us open up more as people too. Like there's things that you share when you're like sitting at a table and you're at a normal even keel body temperature, and then there's emotions and things that you share when you're like hot and sweaty on the side of a mountain. And I just feel like we get a little deeper with the latter,
Yeah, there's something about climbing and just after climbing, it's just this almost primal feeling, and it's hard to explain.
It is, but I feel like everyone listening to this podcast understands.
Yeah, I guess I don't really need to explain that.
No, we all get it. I mean, this is not everybody listening to this podcast has a disability, but I think we're all pretty much climbers listening in here. So I think that's really cool. And I can see how wounded warriors getting involved with ClimbABLE maybe they don't become a climber, but like it could also be an avenue into, I don't know, hunting or fishing or hiking or backpacking, like kayaking, anything in the outdoor world. Like climbing is such it's a gateway.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm going to use climbing as the vehicle to introduce you to the adaptive sports community. However, I get it. Not everyone is going to love climbing as much as I do. And that's okay. I'm going to give you a bunch of climbing experiences, both indoor, outdoor, camping, all of that. However, at that adaptive sports camp at the National Ability Center, I made sure to put in one full day of non-climbing programming. So, there's an obstacle course, there's an equestrian program, there's mountain biking, cool, archery, there's all these other sports, there's all these other organizations. You can go and do all of this stuff with friends that have similar experiences as you. And chances are you can do this without having to drop a dime. And it's like, hey, there's this stuff. You should know about it.
And so often I feel like when you give someone the gift of one resource, it just inevitably opens up so many more, especially if that hasn't been familiar to you in the past. If you didn't know that any of these resources existed, it's like the keyword phenomena. Like once you know the keywords to search for on the internet, like, yes, now you're set loose, you're set free. You can go and you can do all of this on your own. But if a person doesn't even know the keywords to start with, if they don't even know that they fall into a group that gets funding, if they don't even know that these groups exist, like they don't know how to search for themselves.
No, there's a lot of education that needs to be had. I only figured all this out on my own, going through my own recovery, trying to figure out, okay, what's going to actually help me through recovery? What's going to help light a fire under my butt? Where's an actual good place to put my time and effort?
Yeah, and light a fire under your butt is like a really good point in what I hear. A lot of conversations among younger veterans too, like the bingo hall era is gone. Like that's not what wounded warriors are wanting these days when they come back. And so things like climbing, kayaking, hiking, horseback riding, that fits the bill to like get that adrenaline up.
Right. And, they have this mindset, this problem solving mindset. However, I went through it myself, going through recovery, you can kind of get down and out on yourself and you need some kind of catalyst to kind of help pull you out of that funk and get you back towards, getting back towards life. I think all I need to do is reframe their thinking instead of being like, either poor me or why me. It's just being like, oh no, how do I make my disability work with whatever it is I want to do? Like, how do I problem solve this? Or how do I, that's something I've learned to do. And I'm very, very solution oriented. And I've learned to love that with adaptive climbing. It's like, instead of looking at it like, oh, okay, this sucks. No, it's like, how do I make it work with this? And then once you figure out a way to make it work with it, the satisfaction that comes from the extra work, it makes me feel even more so than just a climb. It's like the disability added another layer of problem solving and the feel good that you get from that, figuring out that solution. And then once you get to the top, you put all that together. It's even more than just the climbing, if that makes sense.
No, the payoff is even more. Because of my genetic condition, I am terrible at dynamic moves. So when I can figure out how to static what everyone else has done as a dyno, it is so satisfying, and I'm like, I can find either that tiny little crimp, or I find some way to twist my lower body in a way that gives me just enough tension to reach up so I don't actually have to jump. So much more satisfying than if I had just done the dyno move that everyone else did.
Yeah, I totally get it. And that's the cool thing about climbing. I guess not 100% of the time, but 99% of the time, there's a way to figure out, a way to get through it. And figuring that out, I've learned to enjoy the process of that.
Yeah. I feel like the idea of having to adapt also transfers over into the rest of life really well. I feel like I'm like the master of the quick changing. Okay, this wasn't working. Let's try something else. And I know through my disability, I've gotten much better at that because constantly throughout the day, I'm having to be like, all right, well, this didn't work. I have to try this other little things like a different seating position, a different whatever. The scale changes, but it just makes you really not only good at adapting, but for me, it's helped me get better at letting go of like, this was my plan. Now it's not. I'm going to let it go and I'm going to move on. And you get really good at letting go.
Yeah, I totally get it. I think I might call that psychological flexibility.
Ooh, I like that.
But yeah, just like climbing, same thing. You can apply that to life, and I don't know, that's one of the things that's opened up a lot of doors for me. It's like, instead of staying rigid in your ways, just being open to change. And it's like, okay, this didn't work. Let's not dwell on it. Let's go try something else. Psychological flexibility. That is the way.
So I will go ahead and say we are recording this episode at the very beginning of March of 2024. It's probably going to air in a couple of months. So we don't know where your program will be at that point, but you will likely still be needing money. So can you give folks the hashtags, websites, whatever, if they want to donate, how they can do that?
Yeah, sure. So the folks over at Move United were kind enough to give me a dedicated page on their site to field donations. So folks can either go to climbable.com, which will then redirect to the Move United site, or you can go to moveunitedsport.org/climbable. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there are different donation levels and there's different swag available. You can get a really cool t-shirt, a tank top, some stickers. There's all kinds of stuff on there.
And the logo is great. Is it an ibex or a mountain goat?
Mountain goat with the prosthetic, on the mountain.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you can get a little bit more into your personal journey, however much you feel comfortable sharing. How have you gotten here?
Sure. So while I was still in the Navy, after I had deployed to Afghanistan, I received orders to Sicily, Italy. After I had been out there for about a year, in September of 2014, I fell around 50-ish feet to the ground while being lowered. Broke everything, almost died. I broke my right tib fib, left femur, my left wrist in 3 places, 2 fingers in my right hand, fractured 2 ribs, kidney laceration, liver laceration, moderate traumatic brain injury. I then recovered at Walter Reed for close to 5 years, had over 20 surgeries, spent 2.5 years in an electric wheelchair, did limb salvage on my right leg with 5 different external fixators for 3.5 years, was told I might not walk or climb again, got addicted to methadone because that's what they were using to manage pain, relearned how to walk 3, 4, or 5 times, went through major depression for years. And then in my 4th year of recovery, I stumbled upon a Facebook event page about an Earth Treks Rockville's first ever adaptive bouldering competition. Okay. I had never even heard about adaptive sports or adaptive bouldering or adaptive anything before that. So I was reading the event page and what it was about, and I realized that I fell under the physical/neurological disability category. So I showed up to the competition. There was maybe 8 of us total, and maybe 3 of us in the physical/neurological disability category. I ended up placing first, and it was a ton of fun. And all the people there were like, dude, you should go train for the adaptive national championships. And that's how I found my way into the community.
And can you talk a little bit about when you started to feel that this climbing thing, this adaptive sport thing might be something that you should lean into?
Honestly, that might have even started at the adaptive bouldering competition at the local climbing gym. I just kind of showed up not really knowing what to expect. And that started this journey that I would have never in a million years would have thought would have happened.
When you showed up there, what was the community like? Do you feel, maybe you can't remember, it's been a while now, but if you can, do you recall what it was like walking in, if you felt welcomed immediately or if you kind of had to find your spot?
I think I did feel welcomed immediately, but also at the same time, just from military stuff and other things I've gone through in life, I think I've been dealing with some, PTSD for a while. So while I do feel welcomed in a lot of these places, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff up in my head at the same time. So it's like a lot of the time I'm kind of doing my own thing or just kind of not completely present with other people just because there's a lot that I'm still working through to this day. So it's like at the same time I felt really welcomed and I was like, oh, these are my people. But at other times I've also gone through the whole imposter syndrome thing and being like, oh, I'm not disabled enough, or I don't belong here, or should I really be here? Or like, sometimes I feel like people might even be looking at me being like, you're disabled? How? or I don't know. It's some weird things that I've struggled with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked specifically about that because I also fall into that category that you wouldn't know from looking at me that there's anything quote unquote wrong. And so it is, I too have that occasionally very noisy internal monologue that can, be absolutely distracting. You want to be there, you want to be fully present with people, but sometimes it's hard because you are like that. The metaphor of the duck that is like paddling really fast underneath the water with their feet, and on the surface you can't really tell, but underneath there's a lot going on of just like trying to navigate your own thoughts within a room with other people. Yeah,
it's a lot.
We don't need to dig up old wounds here, but I think it is important to acknowledge it because I think there's a lot of people in the climbing community that have some kind of a thing that makes it difficult to engage on a completely open level. And I think within the disability community, anybody with an invisible disability often has that in the back of their head too, of like, I feel like I'm here. I feel like these are my people, but I also feel like a little bit separate. And it's important just to acknowledge that, to know like you're not the only one feeling that way. And actually we are all welcome.
No, that's a good thing to latch onto, that other people are going through that as well, because it can be really debilitating sometimes.
Yeah, to feel like everybody else is and it's because we don't talk about it. I feel like we don't have great language for it. Like it's hard to talk about, you know what I mean? Like we don't have a good lexicon. We don't have a good vocabulary to talk about these thoughts and feelings. Maybe if we talk more about it, we'll get better at it. I don't know.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah. But they're really, it's hard conversations to have. I feel like it's like...
Well, it's because I think we're part of this community, but at the same time, it's like you start comparing and being like, it's just, I guess that's just human behavior. But this is even hard to talk about right now.
I mean, it's maybe, so we're both climbers. Maybe the way to think about it as two climbers is like, that is in some ways such an Achilles heel of climbing in general is, you said comparison. Like when you start comparing yourself to other climbers, that rarely goes well. If you're scrolling on Instagram and you're looking at other climbers and that's how you're judging your self-worth is by how you compare and stack up to these other people, like that's rarely going to end well. And maybe it's a similar thing here that it's just an energy suck. But you can know that something is an energy suck and an energy drain and not helpful and still do it. Even if you know, like, that's not helpful. And yet.
It's easier said than done to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I guess everyone should just know that, we all go through it. I think 9 times out of 10, I bring myself back to, being in a good place, being like, this is me. I'm disabled. It's okay. Just that disability identity. It's some things I feel really confident on some days, and other days it, kind of wavers.
Yeah. And what I hear from other people is the people who are like, we'll say visibly disabled, like you can see they have a prosthetic leg, you can see a white cane, stuff like that. I often hear from folks that it's like not as much of, they kind of wish that it wasn't always about their disability, like everything doesn't have to be about this obviously physical thing. But then when I talk to people who have invisible disabilities, it has a little bit of this feeling of like, I wish that people would just acknowledge.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Cause like if I wear pants, say, and people can't see my legs, like I've had people come up to me like, you're disabled? How? And then, I go through my whole story, and then like you watch their mouths drop. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not having disability that's easily seen, it can certainly mess with you. And
well, how do you bring yourself back then? You said 9 times out of 10 you're usually able to like bring yourself back from those thoughts and kind of ground yourself back. What do you have, like a phrase or something that you repeat to yourself, or visualization?
No, yeah, I'll really just visualize, just all the traumatic stuff I went through, and losing count of surgeries, and like just thinking about all the injuries from my accident, and just being like, okay, like I'm definitely, disabled. I'm an ambassador for 2 nonprofits that their whole thing is disabled sports. Like, I think that's one of the big things too. It's like, hey, like they would not give you that position if you were not disabled, or I don't know. These are just like some of the things I do in my head to be like, you know what, like, come on, man, bring it back together. You're disabled. You have your handicap placard. You know, you're an ambassador for National Ability Center for Move United. You're on the US Paraclimbing Team. You've had tests to see how disabled you are. So I guess that's one of the, or many ways that I go through that.
Totally. Now that I think about it, like I do a very similar thing with just like, if I feel that way, I'm like, no, this thing about you is genetic and affects every part of life. Like it affects the way I eat, the way I sleep, the way I have sex, the way I sit, the way I go grocery shopping. Like, okay, yeah, it counts. I think it counts. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that was TMI, but it's everything. No. And it's kind of funny, but yeah, you have to like run down and be like, okay, no, you're valid. Let's go on. Yeah. 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 It's kind of interesting that you've known yourself in different phases and different types of a body, and you've been a climber that whole time. And so how do you feel that having climbing as that constant thing, even while your body has gone through all these changes, climbing has been this constant thread? How do you think that has helped? What has that given you, having climbing as that constant thread throughout all these other changes of life?
So in that regard, climbing has kind of given me a new outlook on life. Before my accident, I'm not sure if I was really living for anything in particular. I think I was just existing because I was. I didn't have, a passion or a motivation or, something to kind of live for, if that makes sense. It's like, I was going through the motions of life and, I was doing all this stuff, but like I didn't have a specific thing that was motivating everything. And so when I woke up in the bed at Walter Reed and I'm looking down at my broken body and I can't move any of it, and I very quickly had to take stock of my life. And I was like, okay, what actually matters? And to me, the biggest things that stood out were passions, hobbies, the things you can do for hours on end without knowing where the time goes. For me, growing up, that was photography, skateboarding. And then eventually I found climbing, and climbing was I loved them even more than photography and skateboarding. And so then and there, I kind of decided to drop everything in life, and kind of every decision I made from then on out was in service of climbing, if that makes sense. Like I made climbing my platform for the rest of my life. And again, I explained this a little before. Climbing, it ticks so many boxes for me: the physicality, the mentality, the problem solving, the places you go, the people you meet, the experiences that come from it. So yeah, climbing has given me my platform for life. It's something I really wish I'd kind of zeroed in on much earlier on in life, but at the same time, better late than never.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned before you've climbed harder now, being technically disabled, than you ever did before. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's pretty wild because I was pretty strong before that, but I'd only been climbing for maybe 2 years before my accident. Mm-hmm. And so, starting off climbing, not disabled, then getting involved in a bad accident, then getting disabled, it's taught me a lot, and it's taught me to push through major things or major roadblocks or mental blocks or whatever you want to call them. I think going through recovery and learning how to problem solve with disabilities, it kind of came together into this whole climbing world that I love so much, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, I mean, and now you're taking everything that was so valuable to you that you learned that you want to structure your life around to be the platform for your life. And it sounds like now with this ClimbABLE program, you're making that for other people.
Yeah, climbing has just done so much for me. I've had these experiences, and that's cool. Now, why not give those same opportunities to other people that are going through the same sorts of things? Like if I was able to figure this stuff out, maybe I can take my experiences, use it to help somebody figure that stuff out way earlier than I did, and then potentially just give them a much better recovery, maybe just a much better prospect on life in general.
Mm. And this is nothing that you have to talk about if you don't want to, but if you feel comfortable, you mentioned that you dealt with addiction as part of your recovery process. And I'm wondering if climbing helped you with that as well. And again, if it's not something you're comfortable talking about, we can just move to the next question too.
No, I'm comfortable talking about that. And climbing absolutely did help with that. I was on methadone for years. I had these crazy external fixator devices on going through my leg, going through muscle, bone, toes,
right.
All this stuff. And so I was in a crap ton of pain for years. They tried all these different drugs, and they ended up putting me on what my doctor calls a truck-stopping dose of methadone. I did that for a while, and then once I started getting closer to the end of my recovery and getting to the point where I was starting to walk on these external fixator devices.
Which are basically like pieces of metal through your leg, giant pins.
Yeah, it's the whole leg, goes through muscle, bone. It holds everything in place.
Yeah. So you got to the point where you were walking with this.
Yeah, my doctor eventually wanted me to start learning how to walk with these things. And then I was starting to slowly get back into rock climbing as well. I talked my doctor into letting me climb on the kiddie wall in physical therapy with the thing on my leg. And once I realized I could climb with that thing on my leg, even though it hurt like hell, that's when the depression kind of left my body. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm not down and out. I'm freaking back. I started going nuts with physical therapy.
And did you notice, was that a replacement for the methadone, or how did that?
So once I realized that I was back and I started going nuts with physical therapy, that's when I realized I was doing all this working out and physical therapy on methadone, and I was doing it, but I realized that because I was going pretty hardcore with the physical therapy, like I'd go 5 days a week, and then right after physical therapy, I would go straight into the gym and then do like two more hours of the hardest exercises they would give me in physical therapy, but I would make it even harder and add more weight. But as I was beginning to go nuts with physical therapy, because I had that fire under my butt to come back, that's when I was like, okay, I can't do this if I'm going to be on this crazy dose of methadone. And so I went cold turkey off of the methadone. That was not fun, but I went through that for 2 or 3 weeks. Not fun at all. But this was, again, all in service of climbing. It's time to get off of the methadone. It's time to go through this withdrawal. Mm-hmm. And then once I'm done with that, it is time to go balls to the wall with physical therapy and come back to climbing, because climbing is one of the few things that I care so freaking much in life that I am willing to do whatever the hell I need to do to come back. I don't care how bad it hurts. This is what I care about, and I will figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, and also just congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's not easy. And I think in the climbing community, there's a tendency to kind of casually and playfully refer to climbing is an addiction, climbing is a drug, things like that. And I think we need to be really maybe just a little more careful with our language around that type of comparison, because I think that for so many people, climbing is so healing, and a drug addiction is not. And there's just, there are such harsh or such stark differences between the two. Yes, it is something that compels us. It's a very compelling activity, but I think to compare it to a drug, it's very different from that. And I think that we should be a little bit careful of our language in that way.
No, I agree. And I should talk about that a little bit. Yeah, both climbing and just the outdoors in general, that was also a big part of my recovery. The outdoor therapy, being immersed in nature, trying to come back from trauma. A big part of that was getting away from people, immersing myself in the outdoors, and just, it was such an integral part of my recovery and just starting to feel whole again.
In a way that substances and drugs are a Band-Aid and can be a distraction and can drown out feelings. That's not what climbing is.
Yeah.
Climbing, for me at least, I've cried so many times climbing, I can be trying to suppress emotions or thoughts or feelings from the rest of my life. And if I go climbing or if I go for a run, I will cry. The emotions will come out. It helps me deal with them. It helps the emotions come to the surface so I can process them. It doesn't push them down. It does not drown them out.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of a drug or a substance. Mm-hmm. Typically people use those sorts of things to escape or whatever. And climbing I've used to sort of reconnect with the world. Again, from all the trauma I've dealt with, and just from military stuff, from the stuff I've seen, my traumatic accident, just from stuff in life. I go through phases, where I feel really disconnected from things. And climbing, the disabled community, sports, these sorts of things are the things that kind of brought me back towards reconnecting with everything. And I'm not completely there yet, but I've worked through a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, and I'm starting to feel kind of reintegrated with the whole world, people in general. And I have climbing and adaptive sports community, disabled community, whatever you want to call it. I have all of them to thank for that.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Well, I feel like a lot of our conversation has been a little bit heavy, kind of serious. So I wanted to lighten it up a little bit and ask you about things that you're personally looking forward to, like in the early spring or maybe even into the fall. Do you have climbing trips planned? Things like that. What's getting you jazzed about climbing these days?
So, we have Para Nationals coming up, and Sport Rock is letting me set up a ClimbABLE table there.
Oh,
so
cool.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to get a bunch of donations there.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very focused on fundraising right now. I did just come back from the Mount Washington Valley Ice Fest. I've been doing a bunch of training for ice climbing. I'm really enjoying ice climbing right now. That's kind of my newest passion.
Yeah.
Practicing dry tooling. I just found a cool spot in Pennsylvania I can go try out some dry tooling at. So I might make a trip up there for that. I'm getting more into the mountaineering, ice climbing world. So I'm pretty motivated to practice those sorts of things.
Cool.
And as far as climbing that I love, I do love a good overhang.
Gotta come to the red then.
Yeah. But I guess style of climbing, out of all the climbing I've done, I think the happiest I've been has been multi-pitch climbing, whether that's at rock climbing at Seneca Rocks or ice climbing in New Hampshire. Yeah, multi-pitch is where it's at for me, and I need to do it more. And I'm hoping to lead my first multi-pitch routes this year. I've never smiled so much being on the side of a wall all day, being exposed, making it to the top. Yeah, that's when I felt some of the most alive is multi-pitch climbing.
Well, I'll meet you in Seneca Rocks to do some multi-pitch.
Oh yeah, Seneca Rocks is maybe a 3.5-ish drive for me.
Yeah. All right. Sounds like a deal. All right, cool. Sweet. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for all of your patience. And I'm so glad we finally made it happen.
Cool. Thanks for having me, and reach out with any questions in the meantime.
You've been listening to Everybody Climbs. I'm your host and an adaptive sports journalist, Emily Chen Newton. To reach out to me about the show, use the Instagram handle EveryBD That's every, then the letter B and the letter D, climbs on Instagram. This is a collaborative podcast presented across Plug Tone audio platforms. Big thanks to Mario Stanley, the regular host of Sends and Suffers, for letting us land here for a while. And of course, a huge thanks to Jared for sharing his stories and all the details of ClimbABLE. To support the project, search ClimbABLE and find your way to their Move United page, where you can donate and scoop up all kinds of swag like stickers and tank tops. I got mine a couple weeks ago. That's all for this week. Climb on, climb strong, and remember, everybody climbs.